Let's get going with this program. So welcome to this edition of the Native News Update on Wednesday, December 23rd. Only 8 days left until the new year, so get ready, get through the holiday season here shortly. I'm your host for today's program, Paul Demain. Many of the stories read here can also be found at our website at IndianCountryNews.com, where I have all kinds of nice reading material there where you can relax and scroll up and down. Click wherever you need to go at your own leisure. Here are the news stories for the day from the Associated Press and other Native news sources. 2 young Alaskans charged with hate crimes have been released to individuals who will take responsibility for them. One of the people volunteering to watch over one of the young adults is a woman who called Crime Stoppers to turn them in. A federal grand jury has indicted the 2 Anchorage residents on federal hate crime charges after they allegedly attacked an Alaskan Native man and posted video of it on the internet. A grand jury has returned an indictment against Robert Gum and Deanna Scaglione, who also goes by the name of Deanna Powers. They have pled not guilty to the federal charge. Another Anchorage family volunteered to look after Gum on his release and keep him under tight security. And as the Native News Update begins to expand its coverage with reporters from across the continent here in the next few months and prepares for several special subject productions, we again turn to Alaska Public Radio Network News Director Lori Townsend for a look at some of the Alaska Native news.
Lori Townsend, with what is the Alaskan Public Radio Network looking at in Alaska this week in regards to news and information?
Well, Paul, we just had a story yesterday about the fact that the city of Bethel had a vote in October to change their status from a damp community, which means that certain amounts of alcohol can be imported, but there's limits, to wet, which means unlimited amounts of alcohol could be imported. And we had a story last night about some of the fallout from that there's been a lot of excessive drinking in dry villages around Bethel because now bootleggers can import as much as they want. And so Nunaptuchuk and Akiak have seen incidences of a lot more drunken behavior on the streets. And troopers and village public safety officers are saying that they're finding, instead of 750 milliliter bottles, now they're finding half gallons of whiskey. And so there's kind of a big outcry and a backlash against this vote. There is a petition now that's been circulated, and folks in Bethel have gathered enough signatures to put a question back on a special election ballot for January.
This is for residents of the village to vote on?
It's for Bethel, the city of Bethel, to vote on, so that would then, of course, ripple out and impact the villages that are seeing an influx of alcohol. Some of the VPSOs, the village public safety officers, one gentleman said he's paid to work 6 hours a day. He's now working 12, and they're hoping to change the status back to damp. But the city of Bethel is trying to kind of stave off the fact that a couple of stores and restaurants in the city have applied for liquor licenses now. So it's a big issue out there.
Is Bethel kind of becoming the white clay of Nebraska to the Pine Ridge Reservation? You got a huge area that's dry. You got a little town of 7 people who sell something like 14 million cans of beer just across the border of a dry reservation, and it seems like every single problem that you could find associated with alcohol is found in and around White Clay.
Yes, I think that's a good comparison, that Bethel, it's been more than 30 years since they were a wet community. They've been damp all this time, and just in this short amount of time since the status changed, they've just seen all these problems cropping up. And so now folks are hoping to put another question on the ballot. Although the city council is saying that they want to kind of ask some questions on this ballot initiative to find out what exactly people do want. Because there is a faction of people who say, let us decide how much alcohol we want to have, and other people who say, no, we've seen historically the problems that this has created. in the villages, and especially because of the fact that there's such a lack of steady law enforcement in so many of these communities, where you have communities off the road system where if there's an incident that happens, a state trooper has to fly in a lot of times. And because of the weather situations here and the marginal flight schedules to some of these villages, it can be days before any law enforcement gets there.
Well, we'll keep an eye on it and see what happens with the initiative. What else you got going up in the northwest there?
Well, there's an interesting story coming out of the Puyallup tribe in Washington State is looking into the history of the Cushman and St. George school and hospitals that are at their reservation there, and how so many Alaska Native people were sent there for boarding school and also hospitalization during the tuberculosis outbreaks. And a young woman that I talked to from the reservation who works in the historical preservation department as a researcher said that in compiling the information about the school and the hospital, everyone that she's talked to mentioned Alaska Native people for a couple of reasons. One, because they said they got treated very poorly in the school, and a lot of the folks thought it was because they didn't speak English well, a lot of them, and so they had a much rougher time. They were people said they were a lot shyer, coming from small villages, and so she said one woman told her that she remembered when people would come in, they would take all of their things and put them away until they were released. And she remembered one man's sealskin boots, and he had seal oil in his bag that he had brought with him, and that stuck in her mind that, these people had come from such a long way. And now they're trying to find out who the family members are. They've put out a list of names, and they can't, so many of the graves just say at rest. There's no names on them, and they're in a segregated part of the cemetery. And so there's an effort underway now to try to reconnect families with who their deceased family members are in the cemetery, and maybe put up a memorial for them.
My understanding that the only thing left of that era at the Cushman boarding school and hospital that was there is the cemetery. That's the only thing that's left, and that the correlation at Cushman with the Alaskan Natives might be similar to the Haskell Indian Nation School in Lawrence, Kansas, where those people from Kansas and Oklahoma got picked up, shipped if someone passed away, but Native people from further distances, if they passed away, were simply buried. In many cases, there were no headstones. In fact, it took a lot of time for family members to find out about the passing of relatives. Do you know if they've been able to locate anyone in the Alaskan Native community that actually went to that school at this point?
At this point, no, and that's part of the reason that I'll be doing a story on it, because Amber Santiago, the young woman that I talked to that's working for the tribe there, said that she has tried to reach out. She sent an article or some information to Alaska newspapers, which publishes 6 papers around the state in some of the villages and some of the smaller communities. And she was glad that I had contacted her about the story because they're really hoping to hear from people. She said 6 months ago, 2 men, Alaska Native men, came to the cemetery and were hoping to find a family member because they were sure that at least 3 of their family members were buried there. And they couldn't find them because there were no markers, and they left there very, very sad. She did say there was kind of a happy outcome to that because she did, after they had left, in doing some research, she did find the family members' names, and she said, I just talked to them the other day, so they were really happy to find that out. And maybe now they can get a marker for the graves. Right. But she said so far she has not heard from anyone. They've put this list together. I have a copy of it. We'll link to that from our story so that hopefully people around the state here will look at it and find. I recognize lots of the names on the list as family names here in the state, and so we're hoping that folks will reconnect with those names and find out more about who in their family may be buried there.
Well, we'll follow up on that a little bit more. We're really out of time, but I'd like to know where that link is. If someone's interested in finding that list of names of people who were at that school, where could they go and where can they find your organization and listen to the news?
Well, they can go to aprn.org. That's for Alaska Public Radio Network.org. And that story will run in the next couple of days or next week, and we'll have a link on our site to that list of names. I'm trying to compile a little more information, hoping to connect with a couple people in the state here that may know a little more about it also.
Okay, thanks. We're going to have to connect with you again next week, okay? Thanks for joining with us again, Lori.
Thanks, Paul.
And that is the latest roundup of news from Indian Country on this edition of the Native News Update. Stay tuned for tomorrow, where your host is Kimberly Acosta, and come join us again very, very soon. Miigwech for showing up today.